Thank you, Mr. McGee. All right, let's talk about this test. Number one, I have talked to you, every one of you individually, correct?
Yes.
And every one of you should be confident at this point, correct? This is not a big deal. It's not. They talk about high impact testing, that this is a huge test, the biggest test of your life. Okay, it's not. It's not. This test will not keep you out of college. It will not keep you out of the workforce. It will not keep you in or out of anything. How you do tomorrow will not determine the rest of your life. You determine the rest of your life. Okay? What this test is a gateway test. It's a test that helps to determine where you stand tomorrow as far as college preparation goes. Now, any test is only as good as the day you take the test. So, well, how do we make this a good experience? Which is what we want it to be. So there's some very basic ground rules. Number one, you don't go party tonight. Okay? Taking the test with a hangover is not a good idea. You're not thinking real clearly when you got a hangover. Okay? So partying, no. Try not to get in a fight with your significant other or your parents tonight. That also does not leave you in a good mental state to take a test. So far, it's pretty easy, huh? Thirdly, do get a good night's sleep. If you get a good night's sleep, you're more likely to be wider awake come 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and you'll have more stamina to get through the test. And this is a stamina-draining test. It truly is. You do all those things, and then you do one more thing the morning of the test, and this is really important. Eat breakfast. Give yourself enough time to eat a good breakfast. Here's the way I always looked at preparing for a test or testing. Okay? If I don't get a good night's sleep and I go into a test, my head's in bed. It's not at the test. It's in bed. Because that's where I want to be. Okay? If I'm going in a test and I'm hungry, my head's in the refrigerator. It's not on the test. Okay? So you need to get rid of all the distractions. The distractions are rumbling stomachs and snoring heads. Okay? You get rid of those, and all of a sudden, oh, you can focus. All right? And focus is what this test is all about. All right, so those are the easy things. The next thing you do is you come in confident. I've really tried to build you guys' confidence up because this is a test. All tests are a matter of confidence. If you go into a test feeling you cannot do well on the test, you will not do well on the test. If you go into a test feeling that you're going to fail the test, chances are very high you will fail the test. However, the reverse is also true. If you go in feeling confident in your abilities to get the score you want on a test, you'll get it, and probably higher. And that's the key. I'm not asking you to get 100%. I'm not going to ask anybody in this school to try and get a 36 on this test. We've never done it. Never once. In the history of Worland High School has there been a 36 on this test. Okay? Can it be done? Sure. Somebody eventually will probably get it done. Okay? And there will be an exceptional person with an exceptional lucky day, and they had an exceptional test. Okay? But the majority of us are normal, average kind of human beings. And we tend to score normal, average kind of scores. Okay? So what I talked about with each of you is looking at the score you want. Right? What score do you want on this test? What do you want your composite to look like? What do you want your sub-scores to look like? How many answers will it take you to get that? That's your goal. Stay with that goal. And what you'll see happen is that you more than likely will go above it. Because you also get to throw in all the ones you're guessing, and eventually, and you should be able to get at least some of those guesses correctly. Just the odds themselves will warrant that. Okay? So go through that booklet again that I gave you back, look at the score breakdowns and say, this is the score I want. Now, I'll refresh a few things. If you're looking to want to come back or go into college English, you need a 21 on the English score, okay? It doesn't mean you cannot go to college. It means you have to take some remedial classes if you get below a 21, okay? So it does not mean you cannot go to school. It does not mean you necessarily have to retake the test. It simply means you'll have to take another layer of classes to get to it, okay? So if you're looking at wanting to go to college, and if you're not, you know, you really have no pressure on this test at all. We're going to talk, at that point, we should probably be talking about a different test called the work keys, which is work readiness, okay? And if anybody's in that position where you really think about going out to the workforce when you graduate, then we really should talk about that, because that's a test that's going to be much more useful to you, okay? All right, but I'm going to talk towards post-secondary education in college. So we want a 21 on there. That, if I remember correctly, that was like 40 questions or 48 questions or something out of the 75 questions, if I remember correctly. I think it was right around in that area. What does that tell you? One, you got a heck of a huge cushion in there. You got 30 points, 30 questions that you basically don't have to answer, okay? Or that you can answer incorrectly, or that you don't want to waste your time on, right? So you got this huge cushion already built up. Now, the higher you want to go on that, the less cushion you get, but you're always going to have cushion because nobody in this class is going to get a 36. I'm telling you, flat out, ain't going to happen. Okay? Can we get some 30s? Yes. Are we going to get a 36? It hasn't happened yet. It's been 24 years. I'm still waiting. Got 2 35s, closest we ever came. And that was in the last year. Okay? So, we're looking at what is it that is, what do you want? For math, if you want to go to college algebra, you have to have a 23 on that math subscore. If you're looking at something beyond that in health or health or sciences, you're going to look at needing a 26 because you're going to look at having to go to calculus. Now, here's the deal on this one. Again, if you don't get it on this test, you can do a compass test, which will probably all be required to take in some form next year anyway, because the state's probably going to require it of seniors next year. The compass test is a placement test. It will place you in what math class you score correctly for, okay? So it's another shot, and it'll be free. So again, you are not under any pressure to get that score this time, but look and see what a 26 or a 23 would require, how many questions that are required. If I remember again correctly, it was like 40 out of the 60 to get a 23. So you still have 20 questions you cannot answer. Okay? And that's how you approach this test. Don't worry about 100%. You're not going to get it. Worry about where you want to be. That's what you want. Okay. What we're going to do, because the biggest problem on this test is staying focused. That is the biggest issue for this test because of the time, because of the way the test is designed. Keeping focus is the hardest thing, and it gets harder as the test goes on because you get tireder. As I said at the beginning, this is a test of stamina. They call it a test of knowledge learned, but it really isn't. It's a test of how long can you hang in there with this thing. Okay? And there is studies that show test fatigue towards the end of the test. By the time you get to science, kids are tired of testing. Okay, which is why they put the writing at the end, because it's something totally different than filling in bubbles. Okay, and they knew if they put in the front, then the science scores would really take a tank because now you have 4 tests in front of it instead of 3. Okay, so we know we got to combat that somehow. But they don't give us a break between reading and science, so we don't have a place for you to stand up or stretch. We can't do it. We're not allowed. Okay? So that's the hardest one. That's the one where you got to kind of suck it up a little bit and stay focused. One of the things we're going to do, and again, I think I talked to you all about this, is we are not going to mark our answer sheets as we go through the test. We're going to put our Scantrons aside. We're going to do all our marking in the books. That serves us two things. One, it gives us about 10 seconds per problem more than we would have had. Because if you think about it, when you're looking at your answer sheet, you're going from here, you're picking your answer, now you're going to come over here, you're going to bubble it in. First you got to find the right line number to bubble it in. Then you got to find the right letter number, letter to bubble it in. And then you have to come back to your test, find the question you were on, get yourself refocused on the test. It's going to kill you about 10 seconds per problem. We don't want to kill that time. We want to keep that time. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep our answers. We're just going to circle them in the book. That keeps our focus in the book. It cuts that 10 seconds out. We go right to the next problem. We're still in the book. We're right where we want to be. And it's going to keep us focused in the test. Okay? So we save time and we keep focused. And that's the whole idea. The hardest thing is going to be keeping focus for 45 minutes or 60 minutes. You know the average span for attention on an adult is? How long do you think it is?
An hour. 12 minutes. 7 minutes. 5. 3.
3. 3 minutes is about the longest anyone can stay focused at any length of time. Okay? Now, does that mean you totally lose focus? No, it just means that your mind starts wandering. You go off into other things. And that's normal. That is what normally happens. So, the idea on this is not to fight it. The idea is to acknowledge it and pull yourself back. So when you feel yourself going off, it's not a big deal. Just pull yourself back and put your focus back on it. Okay, yeah, slap yourself in the face. I do that a lot. Okay. You're not allowed to slap each other in the face, though. Okay, so we are going to go through and we're just going to mark them in, and we're just going to circle them in our books. Now we want to look at, when we come in, we want to ask ourselves 3 questions on every problem. We may only ask ourselves 2, we actually may only ask ourselves 1. First question is always going to be, can I do this problem? Can I do it? Can I find the answer? That's always question number 1, because if the answer to that one is no, there's no sense of going to question 2. If it's no, then you just bubble in whatever you want to guess and move on. Okay? Question number 2 is if we say, yes, I can do the problem, then the question number 2 is, can I do it in 30 seconds or less? If the answer is yes, then I do it. If the answer is no, it's going to take me longer than that, particularly on math problems, then what I suggest is put a little mark by that number on your test book, and you're going to come back to that one. But we're not going to spend time on it now. Okay? Now why? Why would I suggest that?
Because you can use a time for a problem you know you can get done.
Exactly. What we're going to do is we're going to try something totally different in the world of testing. In the world of testing, you've been told always, start with number 1, answer every question, correct? Right? Wrong. They've taught you wrong. All the way through school, they've taught you how to take a test wrong. You never start with number 1. You always start with the question you can get right first. So if number 1 is one that you don't know, that's not one you want to start with. That breaks down your confidence. Always start with the one that you know first. Second part is we are going to look at gaining time, not losing time. The way you've been taught on time tests is that every time you spend time on a test, you lose time. Wrong. You're going to gain time. If we don't answer that, if we guess that question out, I figured it out. You have 53 seconds per English question. 53 seconds. You have 1 minute per each math problem. You have approximately 51 seconds per English and per reading and per science questions. So if we can do them in 30 seconds, we bank anywhere from 20 to 25 seconds per problem. Okay? If we guess them out right away, it takes us about 5 seconds, and we've now banked about 45 to 50 seconds. Okay? So what we're doing is we're going to eliminate the ones we don't know, we're going to eliminate the ones we do know, and at the end, we're going to have the ones that are going to take us a little longer to do. Okay? So what happens is you get through this whole thing in that 45 minutes they give you for 75 questions on the English that seems so insurmountable. What you end up with is you have about 40 questions done, which, by the way, is about what you need to get a 21. And you'll have about 20 minutes left to spend either on those other 25, of which you only need about 8 or 10, or you can start bubbling away and having fun making Christmas trees with what's left. Okay? But our goal is, once we've answered a question, we are considering that question done. We're done. We're not going to mess with it anymore. We're not going to go back. We're not going to change questions ever, never change answers. I actually did a statistical study on this. I found that people change answers 85% of the wrong incorrectly. So every time you go and change an answer, you have an 85% chance it will be incorrect. You were right the first time. You know why that is?
Because we doubt ourselves?
Gut instinct, right there. It's gut instinct. Because these are tests of memory. Memory is closely aligned to emotion. So when you get a gut instinct, or for women it would be an intuition. Okay? When you think something is right, go with it. Because it's triggering something emotionally, which is triggering something in your memory that's saying it's correct. It's just Penny. Okay? So don't ever go back and change, because changing, why do you change answers? Because you thought about it, right? Thinking is not what you want to do on a memory test. You don't want to think. Okay, I know these are radical ideas. These are radical ideas. You don't want to think on a memory test, which is what the ACT is. The only thing there's only 2 tests on the entire thing you're going to think on. One is math, where you actually have to logistically do the problem. The other is there's certain questions on the reading test called inferential, where you will have to think a little bit. Those are the only 2 times when you think. The rest of the time, it's memory. It's what you already know. And trust me, you know this stuff.
What about the writing?
Writing, while you're thinking in that you're going to organize your thoughts. That's about it. You've been doing the writing is not going to be any issue for you guys. Honestly, you've been doing timed writings all year. That's what this is. It's a timed writing. Okay? Follow the same format. You're going to be just dandy.
Has anybody heard that announcement about the car park so pathetically that a girl had to have her mother come pick her up because she couldn't get her car out? Did anybody hear that in here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know that's your car?
That's my car.
Yeah.
Is that a gold, silver?
Well, they said the license plate. What's your license plate?
Who remembers their license plate?
Wait, This officer's out back waiting for her, sorry.
Okay. All right, so we're going to do the questions we know first, or the questions we don't know first. We're going to get rid of them all. Okay? Then we're going to go back to the ones at the end and the ones that we skipped. Now, how do we deal with this, getting them over to the Scantrons, because things in the book aren't going to get us scores? So, yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. So when we give the 5-minute warning, you get a 5-minute warning on every test. Okay? Figure about, you can maybe do 1 or 2 more problems, but if you don't feel like you want to take the risk, just transfer at that point. Everything that you put on in your book, just start transferring it over.
At what time?
At about when they do the 5-minute warning. That should give you more than enough time. By then you should have already had a chance to go back and look at other questions that you left already. Your time is not going to be an issue here. So then you start just moving it from the book to the Scantrons. Now, if you hadn't guessed something at that point, then guess it now. Now, there's another reason why we don't put it in the Scantrons first time. Because I'm telling you to skip around, the chances are you will mismark your Scantron. And once you start mismarking your Scantron, you're in deep doo-doo. Okay? This way, that doesn't happen because you're just coming down the book and you're coming down to Scantron and you're just putting them over. Okay? If you have any blanks, just guess one. All right, this is a test where you don't get penalized for guessing. It's not like PSAT where you got nailed if you guessed. This one you can get points. And I've had kids get points on guessing. Some of you guys did. Actually, you're doing the first time around. Okay? So you can guess and get points. I'm going to look for gravy points out of those. And hopefully those build up your score some more. So I'm looking at those points as possibly adding more points to your score than you need. Because remember, we're shooting for a certain level. And then if we're guessing all the rest of them, out of those we should get, depending on how many there are, we should get another 4, 5 maybe. That's going to raise your score up some more. Okay? So it's just smart guessing. Okay, there's another thing you could, well, I used to tell people scan the whole section first. I don't think we're going to do that anymore because we don't really need to if we're doing the questioning thing, where we're asking ourselves the question, because you're really doing that as you go. So there really is no reason to scan the entire section first. Now, when we get to reading, that's a little different. We'll talk about that specifically, because that's a little different than the rest of them. But on English, science, and math, you're going to know which problems you know how to do and which problems you're not going to know how to do, I think, pretty clearly. Remember, science is all graphs, pretty much. That breakdown, it says it's 38% of our data representation. I think if you looked at the test we took, it was a lot higher than that. It was almost all graphs except for like 1 or 2, which were about 5 or 6 questions. Okay. All right. English. We'll go section by section. English, we want 21, so we're talking about 48 questions, roughly 48 questions to get a 21. English is it's either punctuation and grammar, or it's sentence structure. It's pretty much 13, I've given you the breakdown on what they've done. But you basically, when you look at it, it's really comes down to those 2 things. Okay? So if you know that your strength lies in what when we went through the test, we talked about it. If you know that your strength is in sentence structure, then do those questions first. Unless it's an easy punctuation one that you can get. Okay? Or something tense-wise that you can get fairly easy. But again, don't go to something that's going to give you the most trouble. Save it or guess it. But don't beat yourself up on it and waste your time on it where it's not going to do you any good. So spend your time again on the questions that you have the best chance of getting correctly. So if you're better in punctuation grammar, do those. Do all of those first, then come back and do all the rhetorical ones later if you want to. Okay? But the idea again is get to where your score is. What number do I need to have when I get it? Pressure's off. Everything at that point is gravy points. It's gravy. Okay? It cannot hurt you, it can only help you. Okay, math, as you can see from the write-out, you have 40% of the test is pre-algebra and algebra 1. Remember, that's that first column. There's 25 problems in there. Okay?
But that Parker's back.
Okay.
In his defense, it wasn't even close to being gold. Yeah.
It's like it told you that.
Okay, so on math, 40% of the math is going to be pre-algebra and algebra. That means most of you are going to probably have to review some. That's also where most of your points are. Those are the easiest questions probably on the test. Beyond that, you should start at the level that you're currently on. So if you're currently doing geometry, start with geometry problems. If you're currently doing Algebra 2, start with Algebra 2 problems. If you're doing pre-calc and trig, review everything prior. Because there's only about 3 trig questions on the entire test. So you can start there if you want, but who knows when they're going to happen. Okay? So really what you're probably going to want to do is, if you're in Algebra 2 now, is review plane geometry or coordinate geometry. If you're in geometry, review Algebra 1 and pre-algebra. A lot of that pre-algebraic stuff was word problems, okay? And then the thing is, every test is a little bit different in that. They'll tell you that 40% is going to be pre-algebra and algebra, but they won't tell you whether that's ratios or fractions or word problems. They don't tell you that breakdown. That changes from test to test. So if you get a whole bunch of word problems and you really suck at doing word problems, then you probably don't want to do those first, because those will take a long time. Okay? When you choose an answer, one trick is always come up with your answer first before you look at the answers. Multiple choice tests are designed to confuse you. That's their whole purpose. It's designed to confuse you. They put all this stuff, and think about this. They put all this stuff in a very small piece of paper, and they challenge you to keep your focus. And it's a challenge, because your eyes are always going continually. And so for you to focus on one thing when you've got all this stimulation above, below it, to the sides of it, is very, very difficult. And it's designed that way on purpose to confuse you. So one way you get around that is you take your pencil, and this works really well in reading, by the way. This is an Evelyn Woodland speed reading tip. Okay? This is actually from her speed reading. You follow your pencil as you're reading the questions and reading the stuff. The faster your pencil goes, the faster you read it. So when we get to reading, if we really want to read the passage, we're going to be basically skimming, so we're going to be going like this. But our eyes will follow the pencil tip. So we stay focused. So our eyes are not going over here, they're not going over there, they're not going up, they're not going down, they're on the pencil tip.
Hey guys, when we were doing reading and listening to reading, what did I suggest you do? Have a pen, follow the words, remember? This is the reason why, okay?
Yep, it's proven over and over again. One, it will increase your reading speed, but the big thing is it improves your reading comprehension, because your focus is staying where it should be rather than all over the page. Okay, so back to your answers. So we're picking your answer, you're coming up with your answer first. Again, because it's a multiple choice test, the 4 answers that they give you may be very close. There may be 1 or 2 words that separate them from being the same thing. In fact, on English, there even is a choice of no change in the English. We'll talk about that for a little bit in a minute. So it's very, very important that you have your answer before you go to their answers. And then you pick the one that matches your answer. And if you can't find it, you go to the one that's the closest to it. Okay? Now, when you get into math, there is no closest. It's either is or it isn't. So if you did it and you don't have one of the answers on there, get off that question. Don't waste any, don't go back trying to figure it out again. Just get off of it. Go to a different problem. If you have time, you can come back to it later, but if you sit there and now try and figure out what you did wrong, how much time is that going to kill?
Like 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's going to take all your time on one problem that, in the end, is it going to make any difference if you get that problem? No. That's why you have that cushion. Okay? So if you don't get the answer they've got, then either guess it right away, or if you want to come back, if you got the time later, come back to it later, but get off of it for now. Move on to the next one and forget it. One trick I used to tell people to do, and it still works, is you can block out distraction by taking your, since we're not going to use your Scantron, put your Scantron over, the front, the top, or the back, bottom of every question you're on, so you only see that section that you're working on. That's another way to close out some of that distraction. And it works. You can also, as long as you're not on the last page of the section where, turning the page gives you a different section of the test, you can actually turn your page over too, but that really doesn't help because you have writing on there too. So you can use your hand, you can use your Scantron, but the more you lessen the distractions on the test and the more you get yourself focused on the right section of the test, the better you'll do, the faster it'll be as well. Okay, so once you picked your answer, you're staying with it. You're not going to change that answer again. You're not going to mess with it. You're done. So once you've done a question, whether you've answered it, guessed it, or moved it on, you're done with that question. Unless you decide to come back to it later. You are not going to let the test dictate to you. You are dictating to the test. Okay? You're telling the test which questions you're going to answer, not the test telling you have to answer every question. Because you don't need every question. Right? So let you guys get to determine what you do. Okay, the reading question. The reading one now, this is an interesting deal because some people are really good readers and they do really fast, they do really well, and other people are not. Most of us have the average reading grade level in the United States is 8th grade reading. That's where the average adult person reads, at an 8th grade level. Okay? That means there's a fluctuation between reading levels that's from 6th to 10th grade to make that average. Okay, most papers, most tests are written at about a 6th grade level, quite honestly. You get a few when you get into the upper level ones, something like this, they're written about an 8th grade reading level. So they're not written at high reading levels. You don't have to be a great reader to do well on the reading test, but you have to be a smart reader. Okay? And the way you're a smart reader on this test is you lower the amount of reading you have to do as much as you can. The more reading you have to do, the less likely you're going to finish the test. Because again, you only have roughly 51 seconds per question to spend on any particular question. If you're spending that time reading the passage, then on those 10 questions you have per passage, you've probably lowered yourself down to about 25 to 30 seconds. Okay? And now you still got to go back into the passage and find your information. So, here's what we're going to do in order to get you some time. You have 3 different types of questions on the reading test. First kind are direct answers. And what they normally tend to be are vocabulary. So they will say, for example, in line 31, the author states such and such. The word circumstances in this case might most likely be used, or this word most likely be used for the word circumstances in this word. So it's basically a vocab thing. They give you the line item, they say line 31. Do you have to read the whole thing to get this?
No.
No. You go right to line 31, you look at your list of 3 words they give you, 4 words, and you say which one fits best in this one in place of this word. Very fast. Take you about 10 seconds. Saves you 43 seconds. Okay? So, do you need to go passage by passage to do this? No. You can start, you look for them throughout the whole thing. If the first one, if they don't have any in passage number 1, start with look at passage number 2. Do all those across the entire section first, because they require the least amount of reading and they're usually the easiest ones to do. Quite honestly, if you don't know the vocab, what are you going to do?
Skip it.
You're going to guess it, because you don't know it, right? So why would you spend time on it? Just guess it and be done with it. Okay, second type of question. These are this is the only one, this is the only other section other than English, or math, I'm sorry, that requires you to think.